what I'm really asking Mr. Nugent is, I agree with Aidan that you have to think for yourself and be rational and autonomous. But I don't see, let alone why you should be moral without God. I don't see why you should live without God. I personally, I don't think I could tolerate the daily sufferings that I have to go through, the small, minute sufferings, let alone genocides in Rwanda, all the genocides of the last century. I really do need morality to have a God involved. Otherwise, I don't see a point for living.
Well, essentially what you're saying there is that you need a belief in a God. You're not saying that you need a God, you're saying you need a belief in a God. To my perspective, there's no evidence for the existence of a God. So, I mean, what you're saying is not grounded in reality. It's grounded in what you say you need to believe in. And that's why I do accept that a lot of people do find it useful to believe that there is some sort of supernatural being that will cause a just outcome to everything. But the fact that you would like it to be so is unrelated to whether or not it actually is the case or not. I don't want to rehearse the arguments. There's a different debate about whether or not there is evidence for the existence of a God. But from my perspective, you are living without a God. You don't have a belief in a God, but you are living without an actual God, because from my perspective, that God doesn't exist. With regards to the grounding things in Jesus, it's see again the whole issue of Jesus is coloured by the fact that people assume, without reading the Bible, that there is a single Jesus character, whereas in actual fact, if you a good way to approach this is to read the books of the Bible, of the New Testament, not in the order in which they appear in the book, but in the chronological order in which they were written. And if you read them fairly that way and objectively, you will see how the Jesus myth evolved over the decades during which those books were written, and that the early books, chronologically in terms of Paul, the hypothetical Q document, the early parts of Revelation, and up as far as Mark, have a character who believes that the world is coming to an end within his own lifetime, and believes that the kingdom of God is going to come onto the earth within the lifetime of those that are listening to him. And that puts a particular perspective on morality within that context, and puts into perspective, for example, things like Paul's view on marriage and so on. Because that type of, there will be a different morality that will seem important to you if you think the world is coming to an end within your lifetime. Now, as those prophecies proved to be incorrect, and as time went on, the later Gospels started to rewrite the character into a more metaphorical preaching, and the kingdom of God became a more metaphysical concept than something that was going to happen on earth within the lifetime of those that were around at the time of God. So if you read them in that context, you will see how both the mythology evolved and how the different morality for the different stages of that mythology evolved. I don't mean mythology in a pejorative sense there.
Yeah, I'll just make a brief comment, just as I was. Again, what Michael's talking about there is nothing new. It's been a source of study for a long, long time, really. The idea that there's a variety of viewpoints in the New Testament. Obviously, I think Michael's somewhat simplifying things there. There's nothing at all impossible about there being a single person, Jesus Christ, who was interpreted in different ways, and some of these ways could certainly be compatible with each other and could be developing over time. I see no reason why anyone would want to reject that idea. There certainly seems to be evidence for it in the New Testament. To say that there's different Jesuses, I think, is going too far, though, because it kind of it overlooks the idea that there is a historical Jesus who is the basis for all of these interpretations. And of course, the idea that these interpretations are kind of valid ways of understanding Jesus and his message, obviously, is at the heart of Christianity. Even though we recognise that there are different gospels and so on, we believe that there's a unity behind them all. A certain amount of diversity too, but behind all that, basic unity. Again, that's another debate, I think, really.
Aidan, can I just respond to Mr. Nugent?
Briefly, yeah, if you want.
Yeah. I disagree with that because although your morality isn't inspired by God, it's still predicated on his existence, because you wouldn't be alive to be moral if there was no God, because there would be no redress, there would be no reward. So I think people who are moral and do adopt rational secularity can and do live with God, even though he hasn't been proven, nor is he being disproven.
It's yeah, I mean, it's a different question really. The first thing that whether there is a God or not, I mean, it's another debate. I'm quite happy to go down and debate it some other time. But I mean, the debate today is it kind of makes an assumption that I let roll in my initial talk that that there may be a God. I don't accept that premise. I don't believe that there is a God, and so my viewpoint on that is very different to yours. So in order to address that, comprehensively, it would require a separate debate, I think, in fairness.
Okay,
I don't mean to debate. I'll talk to you about it later on.
I think you had a question there.